everybody, this is a video on how to tell if a relation is a function or not a function. Please take out a notebook and write down this topic, essential question, and the date. As we go through the slides, please pause the video on each slide and copy it into your notebook before I say the notes. So the question for today is, what makes a relation a function? A relation is a function if for every input x, there is exactly one output y. I'm actually going to write this word out. One output y. So every time you input something for your x, you're expecting to get exactly the same output y. So we know that functions come in many different forms. So I'm going to show you a few examples using a table, equation, and graph to decide if it's a function or not. So these are function machines that you'll be working with today. Every machine has an input, the rule of what's happening in the machine, and an output. And your job is to pick 3 inputs for each machine and write those outputs. So from this table, it basically looks like our input and output table already. If I input 4, my output is 8. But then I input 4 again, and my output is 2. Then I input 4 again, and my output is 3. So I'm inputting the same number each time, 4, 4, 4, but I'm not getting exactly one output. The first time I put in 4, I get 8. The next time I put in 4, I get 2. The next time I put in 4, I get 3. So my input 4 does not have exactly one output y. So this is not a function. So one way to tell if something is a function or not using a table is to check for a repeating input and make sure that every time you're getting the same output. For example, if this was actually 8 and 8, every time I input 4, I get 8, 4, I get 8, 4, I get 8. That would be an example of something that is a function. But this one is not a function. So we can do the same thing using an equation. This time our input is a number that we're inputting for x, and our output is what we get after we input our number into that equation. So let's just pick 3 inputs. I'm going to say 0, 10. Let's do 0 again to see if we get the same thing every time. So first I'm going to input 0. So I'm going to replace x with 0. So I'll get 0 minus 10 equals negative 10. Okay? Next, I'm going to input 10 for x. So I'll get 10 minus 10 equals 0. Okay. So far, so good. I inputted 0, I get an answer. I inputted 10, I get an answer. This one is the real test. If I put in 0 again, am I going to get negative 10 again? is this a function? So let's see, 0 minus 10 equals negative 10. So every time I input 0, I'm getting the same output. Every time I input 10, I have to get 0. There's no way I can input 10 and get an output that's not 0. So because every input has one exact output, this is a function. So right now we have one example that's not a function and one example that is a function. So we've looked at tables, we've looked at equations. Now let's look at a graph. These are a little bit trickier to read. So I'm going to start by picking some inputs. Your X is your input and your Y is your output. So I'm going to pick a number that appears on this scale here. Let's see, I'm going to pick -3 as one of my inputs. I'll pick 1 as another, and 4. Okay, so I'm going to look for my input first on my x-axis. I see my input at -3. I'm going to draw a line up or down until I reach my function. So this point is at -3, comma, my y at that point is 1. So when I input -3, my output is 1. I'm going to input 1 now. Here's where 1 is. This time I have to go down to reach my function, which is this red line. This point is at 1, -1. So for my input 1, my output is -1. Next, if I input 4, my output is 2. So basically these pairs of input and output are all points on our function line that's in red. Well, I can see every time I input -3, the only output I'm going to get is 1, because I only hit my line for my function at 1 point. Same for 1, I only hit it at 1 point. And for 2, I only hit my function at 1 point. I mean for 4, I only hit my function at 1 point. That means that this is a function. Because I can see for any input I put into this function, I'm only going to hit my graph 1 time. This is also called the vertical line test, which I can talk about later. Basically, if I ever draw like a vertical line up and down, and it only hits this line for this function at 1 spot, that tells me that every input is going to have exactly 1 output. So I'm going to leave you with one more example that I won't go through all the way. But you could see if I inputted x equals 1 into this function, I'm actually going to get 2 outputs. I'm going to get an output here at 1, comma, I think that's like 1.7. I'm also going to get an output here at 1, comma, -1.7. So for my input 1, I get an input of 1.7. I also get an output of negative 1.7. Same input, 2 different outputs. This one is not a function. Because if I draw a vertical line here, it's hitting my graph at more than one point. That shows this input has 2 different outputs. Okay, I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope that this helps you complete your worksheet. We are going to continue working with function or not the rest of this week. Thanks, bye.